Hello and welcome back to Wonderworld for a very special episode for the 5k special actually. I announced this in my 5k video that you'll have hopefully seen where I announced the competition and the 5k Q&A, and today I'm going to be RMC-ing the wooden coaster that I built for Wonderworld. Now, I planned that I was going to RMC this coaster way back, even before I started the series. Originally, when I put the old pieces of the coaster in the maintenance area that you'll have seen if you watched the Wonderworld series, I put those in the maintenance area because I was originally going to RMC it as part of the series, but then I thought I can add the gravity group track and do that during the episode and then make the RMC as a 5k special. I thought that'd be something nice, exciting to do. I've never actually done an RMC conversion before of a coaster. I've made an RMC like ground up coaster in the game before, but I thought it'd be quite interesting to convert an older wooden coaster with RMC track, because during the Wonderworld series when I made this coaster I actually compared it quite a lot to Robin Hood at Wallaby Holland, which is a Vekoma wooden coaster, which as you all know got converted into Untamed by RMC. So since they're a similar height and somewhat of a similar layout, that is going to be the main inspiration for the conversion of Timber, which is this wooden coaster from Wonderworld. And speaking of Untamed, this will be where the first element that I'm kind of getting inspired from Untamed will be coming from, which is the 270 degree inverting stall, as it's called in RCDB, which is a bit of a mouthful, but yeah, it's basically kind of, I don't know how to describe it, it's kind of like a heartline roll into a sideways stall, and then out of a, and then another heartline roll basically. It's quite a complicated element to actually work around because it depends which way you go in it, about which way you want it to turn and everything, but I'm quite happy with the way this turned out. I do go back later and add in like 2 meter sections, because I build in 4 meters for when I'm building coasters, 4 meter track length sections, and I go back in later for some of the more intricate inversions to convert it to 2 meter sections of track. So let's get on to the actual topic of the video, which is how to RMC a wooden coaster. Basically the first step I did was to remove the wooden coaster station and replace it with the RMC coaster station, leaving the wooden track in place. And then all you do is go around your layout with the new RMC track and replace the elements, but the key thing is to try and keep above where the original supports are if you want to retain them. Like with most of this coaster, I pretty much stay exactly where the old track was, like height-wise above it, so that when RMC would come in to like take out the old track and put the new track in, all they would be doing is reinforcing the old coaster supports and building on top of those to accommodate the new track, as opposed to like deleting the entire thing. You just basically have to go around and rethink how all these new elements would work on this coaster. Like with this part here, this was just a simple flat turn as you come out of the station, but I've added that kind of outer bank there and the little off-axis airtime hill before you reach the main coaster. And for the main coaster, because I've actually made it taller as well, you need to think about how this new track and all the new transitions and inversions and profiling are going to handle this extra speed. And if you watch my 5k announcements video, you'll know that this RMC coaster is technically already actually in the park file. If you look at the trees, which are just to the left of where I am now, on the Wonderworld map that's available on Steam at the moment, there will be this RMC station basically just sat in amongst all those trees. So if you want to give this a go, feel free, send me some screenshots on in my Discord. It'll be really nice to see what you come up with. I think most of what you'll find me doing in this time-lapse is basically just constantly reprofiling certain parts, especially with smoothing coasters in this game, especially with RMCs and wooden coasters for some reason. When you smooth them, they lose so much of the profiling, which is why I build out of smaller track pieces. But quite a lot of it, if you ever get round to RMCing your own wooden coaster, is reprofiling quite a lot of it. Like with here, I kind of realised that the drop was a little bit too big and a little bit too steep for how fast it was taking some of the elements in the coaster, even with the coaster friction levels turned down to 1, so if I had to give one piece of advice when RMCing your first wooden coaster, it would be to just have patience, because a lot of it will be reprofiling. As you can see here, like I mentioned earlier, I'm just going through for some of the more intricate parts of the ride, I suppose you could say, like this inversion here, and just changing the 4 meter track pieces to 2 meter track pieces. Just having the smaller track pieces allows you to be more accurate with the profiling, and when smooth, just makes it a lot smoother as well. You'll see from the POV that these inversion sections end up being really buttery smooth, which is definitely what I wanted, because that's probably the first thing you think of when you think of an RMC, just how smooth they are, and that was one of the most important things for me that I wanted to get right when making this coaster. I'd say that most of the time when you're building this, like I said about keeping the track like directly over the top of where the old track is, it's basically just about thinking what kind of inversions and forms you want to bring to this coaster. Like here, this inversion originally almost became like an outer bank to go into like an Iron Gwazi style death roll going down it, which ended up kind of flattening out a bit too high to be one of those. But then I think I go back later and change the actual direction of entry for this inversion to make it go in the same direction as you're banking to go into it, just because it felt a bit smoother. The best thing I can say is probably just to, as you're building these elements, is to, once you've built them and got them like an okay amount of smoothness, is to ride them. Like just keep going through and testing the coaster in POV, like in guest view or in track view, and just to see how it rides, because at the end of the day, like the profiling can look amazing from off-ride, but if when you ride it and it doesn't flow right, which I think to me is the most important thing, that's just the best way to test it, because if it doesn't flow right, then you haven't got a good coaster. Now you'll notice that some parts of this coaster, like the bottom of this drop here, have just quite simply just been almost retracked, but then some parts of it here, like this hill, I'm simply just exaggerating certain features, because that's quite a lot of what RMCs do. If you look at like quite simple RMC elements compared to wooden coasters, they're just mainly more exaggerated, like they might be more banked, or like with this section here, just more whippy. Like it goes, I think this coaster, the highest bank at this point is about 75-80 degrees, where this coaster goes about 110, so it's technically classed as an overbank. It just makes the coaster like a little, just that little bit more extreme is basically what RMC conversions do. Yes, they add inversions and stuff, but yeah, you still have to think of the more boring elements like the valleys and the hills and stuff. They still have to be kind of acceptable for what a coaster can do. Like this one here, it's still kept flat, because yes, RMCs are still extreme, but they still need, I don't know, moments to breathe through the different elements, I suppose would be the right way to put it. I think another really helpful thing you can do as well is to think about the positioning of elements, not only on the ride for when you're riding them, but on the ride for how they would look off-ride. That's a bit of a mouthful, but like with this kind of, I suppose this would be like the last stretch of the ride here, this airtime hill that's kind of like nicely framed over the entrance of where you enter the area. Just the RMC version of that, I instantly thought was, oh, let's just make that a stall. It's around the same shape, obviously a stall would be a little bit bigger, but just thinking about this off-ride, this would be such a nice feature to walk under. Obviously that's massively exaggerated there. I do end up making it quite a bit smaller, but you just think about the presentation of an RMC, it needs to be big and epic, so I thought a stall there would be quite a nice element to kind of still recognise the older ride, like the airtime hill that it could have been. It's like still taking the same shape, but like an almost creative new version. And the way here how it kind of transitions back into these snappy kind of S hill as it goes back into the station here, still keeping most of the profiling from the previous coaster, but again just accentuating certain parts of it, making it a little bit taller, making it a little bit more banked. And the speed that this will hit the brakes with, if you've been on an RMC before you will know, but the speed that some RMCs hit the brakes with is just insane. And then the last step to the conversion here is to just turn all the supports on basically and delete the old coaster. And that's it, you've got your coaster. Now you can just see me here going in, adding in these last realism touches, putting in the transfer tracks. Obviously the older transfer tracks I had was part of the older coaster, so if you just pop these back in, kind of add the metalwork to the parts of the ride that go over the road that I had, because the way that this coaster was designed, the maintenance road and area is kind of like in the ride area, like underneath the station and around the station, so I had to add these metal structures underneath. And the paths here as well, I had to relocate some of the paths just because of the drop kind of drops down lower almost because of how sharp the new drop is. It's steeper and bigger, so I had to relocate the entrance path to the ride, which conveniently ended up being underneath that first airtime hill and the stall towards the end of the ride, which I think is a much better entrance than having you split off in two different paths like the older wooden coaster had. So I was really happy with how this turned out. And then I always add all my realism features in as I'm going along, like the don't die fencing, just so I don't have to do it in bulk at the end. And then I thought, since this area is getting like modernised almost, I'd get rid of the older style kind of like swinging flat ride, I suppose you'd call it, the swinging eagles. and then add in like a much larger new thrilling flat rate, which ended up being this Intamin frisbee thing. I can't remember the proper name for it, but I just thought this would fit the area quite nicely. It's kind of broken the height barrier bit that the park already had, but then since the RMC's broken it as well, it's kind of appropriate to have like 2 bigger rides, I think, in this area. So I just thought this would be a nice addition. I changed the colours on it as well because I don't like the default colours, but I thought the 2 of the rides kind of like complement each other quite nicely. Then just like the coaster, which I'll rename later, I wanted to rename the flat ride as well, but still keeping in with like the bird theme that the older flat ride had, so I renamed this Condor. Then after this I decided to completely change this kind of like curved block section that the older coaster had, just up at the top here. Obviously the original coaster had this as like a brake section, but with how fast this new coaster is, I just thought it doesn't really need this kind of pause point almost, like it doesn't need the block section because of how fast the coaster's going. You'd be going through the layout a lot quicker anyway, and the need for a block section halfway through, like on most modern RMCs like think Gwazi or Zadra, they don't have block sections halfway through. So I ran this round a few times to see what the dispatches would be like if I got rid of this as a block section, timing it right, and it worked out that it's still quite a decent throughput, so I knew that I could get rid of it. So that's when I kind of decided on having this like almost wavy banked part that again didn't really work too well, so it just kind of takes a few iterations to kind of understand what you want out of the coaster, but I eventually decided on this kind of like almost double up S-bend sort of thing that ends up being a lot more flat than this, and then this kind of like almost stall wave turn mimicking the double stall that's above it, and then that just brings you nicely into the normal stall here, which I've changed into the 2 meter method just by going and replacing the 4 meter track sections into 2 meter track sections just to make it much smaller. And if you wonder why I coloured the top of the stall in pink there, that's just to work out which part of the coaster I wanted to keep flat. I do that quite a bit just so I know where I am in the layout, just you know which parts to keep flat and which parts you can kind of blend into each other. That's it, we've finished this RMC conversion. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I really hope this helps if you want to change one of your wooden coasters in your park to an RMC. And of course, if you did like this, please give the video a like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. It'd be greatly appreciated. And here we are back in Wonderworld for one last time. We have finished the RMC conversion. I really hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. I've loved converting this coaster. It's been really fascinating to do actually, just learning about how RMC convert their coasters. I've watched a couple of like video documentaries on YouTube about it just to really understand their process of changing these older kind of a bit stale coasters I suppose into much bigger RMCs, and I'm so happy with it. You can see there the drop is just, it just looks so more foreboding on the rest of the park and on the skyline, and just I love the way RMCs just look in general, and especially with this entrance piece here underneath the airtime hill and the stall, which is how you enter and exit the area. It's really cool. Obviously you can see I've gotten rid of that path down there just because of where the drop is, but so you can see it coming over the edge. I'm so happy with it. It comes really low down towards the path as well, which is something you don't really get on RMCs. I know Zadra definitely does it, but how close you actually can get with the path interaction, because it's still perfectly safe, but watch it fly past. Oh, it's just perfect. I love it. And that double 270 degrees inverting stall, whatever you call it, from Untamed, I'm so happy with how that element turned out. And it still wraps around the entire area, just like it did before, but just that little bit more extreme now. I'm so happy with it. Obviously you can see the flat ride here as well, Condor. Just a new thrilling style flat ride that's made its way into the area. Everything else in the area stayed the same pretty much. I've changed the paths a little bit, and then I've changed some of the plantation around it to make it look a bit more wild. Still the same food unit, but obviously some time's passed in the area, so this might be like, I don't know, 5-6 years after the gravity group retrack. It could be even more, maybe like 10. I don't know how long they've been doing retrack works for, but yeah, there we go, the RMC Timber Titan I've called it. So the original name was just Timber. I thought I'll probably do what most of them do, where they call it like Iron Gwazi for Gwazi, and like, I don't know, you always put some sort of like word in front of it, don't they, where it's like steel or iron. Something powerful sounding, so I went for Timber Titan. I thought that sounded quite cool. It's definitely a lot more speed with this version of the ride. Let's have a quick overview of the area. I'm so happy with how it turned out. It still kind of hugs this plaza area, but you can see it's more grown up with the plants around it and just more wild as this more thrilling addition has come to Wonderworld. I'm so happy with it. You'll have to let me know what you think of this coaster in the comments and whether you've had a go at RMC-ing the coaster in the park. Like I said, this RMC, the actual station for it is in the bushes somewhere next to the wooden coaster if you go and look for it, but I will add this updated version of Wonderworld with the RMC to the Steam Workshop as well, just like the other Wonderworld main park, so you can check both of those out if you'd like to. Just look at the views you get around in this area. So immersed in the area, even more so than last time I think, just with the increased scale of the coaster and all the plantation around it growing even more. Flying past there. Yeah, I'm really happy with this. I probably will do another conversion at some point just because of how well I think, at least personally, I think this one's gone quite well. So it's still lagging a bit, the park, you can probably tell, but there's something in it, there's something in the map that's stuttering, I think. It happens in most Planet Coaster maps. There's one certain, there's probably all these beams actually, there's one certain element that's making it lag more than others. But yeah, that's it. And one final view over towards the coaster. See it going off into the distance. It's a fair bit taller as well. I'll put the stats of the ride in the description if you would like to look at those, but yeah. Oh, I cannot control the camera in this game. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next park series, which is underway. I've already started it. Very exciting, I know. If you want to get some exclusive views on that and see what I'm doing, you could always become a channel member. Those are linked in the description, or you can just click the join button to find out more. So you can get exclusive previews of what I'm up to, the next park series and all upcoming videos. So thank you again very much for watching. I hope this tutorial helped you, and I will leave you with some POVs and some off-ride of the coaster.